Hey guys! So if I was a good booktuber, I would be doing a July wrap-up, a reading rush wrap-up, an August TBR, but I'm not. So we're going to freak out over an amazing book that I just read. But before I get started, welcome back. I'm Sarah from Who I Am Among the Pages, and if you're new here, that's awesome. I hope you stay, and feel free to subscribe and click that little bell notification down below. If you're not new, great to see you again. So for last week, it was last week, the reading rush, I had picked out a classic book that I had been meaning to read. So really it fulfilled 3 requirements for the reading rush, 3 of the badges. I don't want to say requirements. It was a book I had meant to read last year. There was a book to movie adaptation, and it was a title with 5 or more words. And that book was The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. And don't mind how beaten up it is. I bought it used, and I'm rough on things, like we all know. So I had decided to read this because last summer, before school started, which, hello, repping Virginia Tech, before school started, I went to a community college for my freshman year, and my best friend went away to Virginia Tech, where we're both going now. And we had like a whole, last hurrah. We went to the county fair, we ran around, we had a lot of fun. We came back and we watched The Phantom of the Opera, the 2004 version with Gerard Butler as the Phantom and Emmy Rossum as Christine Daae. And it was her favorite movie. She'd been after me forever to watch it, and I finally did. I loved it from the first 5 minutes, and I was totally obsessed when I found out that it originally came from a book. There's also, if you're interested, there's also a 1960s, I believe, adaptation of it. I think there might also be a silent film adaptation. I'm not totally sure about that. But those versions focus pretty solely on the horror aspects of it. And don't get me wrong, they're totally valid, because this, if you think about it, is totally horrifying. But the 2004 version and, of course, the Broadway musical, both acknowledge the horror side of it, especially the psychological, emotional horror parts. But definitely go more on the romanticism. So, I had watched the 2004 version, which was definitely the more romantic side of things. Became obsessed with that, and had wanted to read the book, the next day. So I got a copy, just put it off, so now I'm reading it. Now I read it. So before I get into spoilers, which, I'm sorry, but 90% of this video is going to be spoilers, so if you do want to read this, even though it's been out for over 100 years, without any spoilers, go ahead. It's been nice seeing you, but the rest of the video is going to be totally spoilerish. So, bye. But if you want to stick around, get ready, because I am going into this. So, first off, I want to start with just how amazing it was to me that Andrew Lloyd Webber, who wrote mainly the composition for the Broadway musical and for the movie adaptation of it, because the movie adaptation was basically more of taking the musical and making a film from it than it was from the book. The movie and book are very, very different. There's characters that you meet in either one that either don't exist in one version to the other. For example, in the movie, we get to know Raoul very well. Raoul de Chagny. And forgive me if I'm butchering any of these names. They're French. I've never taken French. I took Latin in high school. Totally useless dead language, but that's what I took, so I really don't understand French pronunciation very well. But in the movie, we know Raoul de Chagny very, very well. In the book, we also know him very well, but we also get to know his older brother, and his older brother, Philippe, I hope that's it, Philippe, he plays a huge role in how Christine and Raoul got together, and also his death. He ends up in the book, Philippe, he's found like at the apex of the book, mysteriously dead in the underground lake that's beneath the opera house. That the Phantom, who we find out in the book, is named Eric, and I've seen that movie plenty of times, and I have never heard it mentioned that his name was Eric. And yeah, he's found in Eric's home, so it's kind of presumed that it was him. But then, he kind of denies that. Anyway, in the movie, Philippe, the Count, is never mentioned. He might be mentioned inside once when we first meet Eric, or not Eric, Raoul, but never again. And I genuinely don't remember it, and I've seen that movie I don't know how many times in the past year. But the main thing I was really amazed with was the fact that Andrew Lloyd Webber and the writers for the musical and the movie adaptation took so many of the main events from the book. Like a huge moment in the movie is when Christine goes through the mirror in her dressing room, and the organ starts playing. It's beautiful. It's very beautifully done visually, and the music fits very well. The actor and the actress are perfect for each other. It's a huge moment when she goes through the mirror, and that is within like the first half hour of the movie. In this version, in the book, it's well on into the book before we find, it's at least 100 pages in, before we find out that she's going through the mirror to see the Phantom, Eric. She's seeing Eric. But they take so many of those details from the book, like the white horse that Christine rides on out to the cemetery to see her father's grave, and try to understand, like, what is the angel of music? What is the Phantom of the Opera? That white horse is never really mentioned, his purpose, why he's there. And in the book, it fills in that he's used for an opera that's not performed that often. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. You can find it very easily in the book. It's mentioned a lot, but I cannot pronounce it, so I'm not going to try. But he's used for this opera that's not performed very often, and Eric stole him. And all you see in the movie is him being led around, like, in the mezzanine. I'm not really sure how to say that because I'm not really a theater person. And the levels below the stage, you see him being led around. And you also, of course, see him when Christine rides out to the cemetery. But you don't really know anything else about him. So it's just things like that that the directors and, the composer took from the book and kind of adjusted things and put them into a different story. They use one story to tell a totally different romance. And Phantom of the Opera is a romance in the book, but it's more based on the fact that Christine is very innocent. She's very lost. She's very, she's still, absorbed in her father's memory. Finally this angel of music that her father promised to send has finally visited her. Then her childhood sweetheart, Raoul, shows up. And, the Phantom, won't let her and Raoul be together. And it's very much, I don't want to say it's innocent, because it ends up, he's sick. The Phantom is sick. And the fact that he is like, well, you're going to marry me or I'm going to kill you and Raoul. So, yeah, they managed to tell a totally different romantic story and gave the Phantom a whole different light. I think one of the things that in the book I think is kind of unbelievable is how they describe Eric, where he's pretty much a skeletal face. Like, of course, the whole reason he wears that mask is because he's deformed. But in the book, he's literally described as having no nose, and like a living corpse is how he's described. And, I kind of found it hard to believe that anybody could be so deformed, especially in that time with very limited medicine, could survive. And, like, I know, it's not supposed to be, like, realistic fiction, but at the same time, what else was it going to be? Hey guys, sorry about that. I was getting a phone call and my phone on a film on my phone, and it looked like a familiar number, but it turned out just to be like one of those robocalls. And that frustrates me to no end. So I hope I'm not alone in that. I hope I'm not like the only person that gets so angry over those. But anyway, so yes, to sum it all up, so I don't rant anymore on that point, one of my favorite things to experience in the book was the original story that the directors and writers then took those pieces, the major events, and made a whole new story. We're able to kind of reorder things so it cast light on different parts of the story and made those parts more prominent. So the next point I want to talk on, and I really should have written this down because I'm totally ranting, but I just finished this book and I wanted to sit down right now and talk about it before I could like process my emotions. I wanted to talk about like the richness of the characters, and I don't know how many other people have read this, you know, it's a very old book, but Milton's, I believe it was Paradise Lost. I read it in high school for a college level English class that I took, and the whole amazing thing about Paradise Lost is it was revolutionary for being the first time we saw an anti-hero. An anti-hero is, in case you don't know, is the character that either ends up being the hero of the story, or is somebody that you want to win. You know, you want to see them succeed, even though they're not the perfect hero. Like in Paradise Lost, it's Satan. You want Satan to triumph over God because of the way it follows him, and it follows his emotions on what's happening. And, you know, after, I believe it was after he'd been cast out, so it's really, you know, it makes you feel for him, where you really, I don't want to say you shouldn't, but you wouldn't normally, or especially at the time, nobody would. There, you know, 1,000,000 to 1 people wouldn't. So it was, you know, it's that kind of thing that Gaston Leroux made the Phantom into. The Phantom is the perfect example of an anti-hero, I believe, anyway. Because the good thing about this book, too, is that it tells a full recounting of Eric the Phantom, the Angel of Music, whatever you want to call him, of his past. You know, how he got where he was, what he did, just, you know, even where he's born, that sort of thing. So, the first time we get to know him, he just killed, or forced the suicide, basically, of the head machinist, which is somebody, I think nowadays we just call them like stage crew, like that move the props and that sort of thing around. You know, we find out later that he was trapped in the Phantom's torture chamber, and then freaked out and killed himself. He hung himself. And then the Phantom dragged him up, hung him up below stage so that people would find him. So that's the first glimpse that we get at the Phantom. And then for a while, it's very similar happenings, like, you know, basically threatening the new directors of the theater, causing the chandelier to crash down on the crowd, and it killed a couple people. Killed one person at least. It's different happenings like that, and then, you know, we hear of him taking Christine from Raoul and, you know, forcing her to stay with him. She's horrified. She doesn't want to be here. She'll do anything to escape him. So really through the book, you know of his emotions and you know his attachment to her, but he's doing these terrible things. And for me, at least, it was hard for me to separate the Phantom that Gerard Butler played, because he was definitely romanticized more, and Gerard Butler in that movie was fine. And it was very hard for me to separate the Gerard Butler Phantom from the Phantom in the original book. So when I was able to do that, like, I really didn't like him. Like, I was kind of upset at some points that, even though I loved the movie long before I loved the book, it's been literally a year since I saw the movie for the first time and wanted to read the book. But I was actually upset at Andrew Lloyd Webber and the other directors for having romanticized somebody like this. I was like, this is just straight up romanticizing evil. Like, this is not good. But at the very end, he, he gets Christine to stay with him. She agrees to marry Eric, the Phantom, the Angel of Music, whatever you want to call him again, so that everybody else can go free, because he had gunpowder in the basement. He was ready. If Christine said no, he's going to kill everybody. So she agrees to marry him. She agrees to live as his wife. And then, he realizes, like, oh, well, this is what I think love is. The fact that she's willing to give everything up, even if it's not necessarily loving me. She's willing to give everything up to help other people. And, she kissed him without his mask, willingly. She didn't, and, he's saying, oh, she didn't flinch away. She stayed with me. And then he's crying and weeping at her feet. And he tells Christine to go marry Raoul, because that's all he ever wanted, was to be loved by somebody. And, it really just makes you, it really makes you feel for him, because, the entire book, you really don't like him, but at the very end, he's wrapping up in this emotional rant, like, basically why he did everything that he did. And it's something like, spell broken, monster gone. He felt terrible about it, and was, wanted the best for her. And I just, you really shouldn't like the guy. Because especially when you hear his past, like, you also hate him more, but you also feel for him more, because his own mother gave him his first mask because he was so disfigured. His parents wouldn't deal with him, so they sent him to be toured in fairs and circuses, that sort of thing. Then he went and worked for different empires, basically. He built a castle of traps and that sort of thing. Then was told after he built this, so that nobody would know the secret of how the passages and everything worked in the castle, he was put to death. He was helped to escape by another character that we know in the book, the Persian, which we don't know in the movie. But, he kills people for fun. Like, this is kind of what he does. But at the same time, years pass, and then, everything leading up to him letting Christine go with Raoul, you hate him. But then again, it's so conflicting. And moving on to Christine. Christine was written very consistently and very well as an innocent, sweet character. She was very talented, but she was very grateful for that talent and credited totally the Angel of Music for it. And her father. She loved her father dearly, and, attributed her talents to anybody but herself. She's so torn between, does she risk everything and go for Raoul, or does she just listen to the Phantom and make sure everybody gets away safely? And she's very consistently written that way. And then at the very end, she takes a stand. She's like, all right, I'm going to do this. So she was very much a static character and kind of a side character, even though she's really the center of everything. She was more of a side character until that very end, when she stood up for herself and was like, I gotta save everybody. And I just really, really loved that. Raoul, of course, is very much the traditional hero in this, like, love triangle that we've got going on. He's handsome, he's wealthy, he's a good person. He was Christine's childhood sweetheart. And, we see him get the girl, but at the same time, that's who you always wanted to until the very end. And then the Phantom lets her go, and it's kind of a letdown. In a way, at that very end, I was hoping the Phantom would get her. Like, trying to separate the stories from what I know in the movie versus what I know of the book. But yeah, I just, this is a long video. I'm sorry. But absolutely read The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. It was originally published serially in French, and I believe you can still get the original the original version. But if not, this translation by Myrelle Rubiere. Let's see if it'll show up. But anyway, this is a very good translation. I believe there are other translations that have been done more recently, so you don't have to deal with the slightly archaic phrasing of things. It's not hard. It's not hard to read. Not at all, especially compared to some other books of the time. I'd say it's even more easily read and more fluently read by a modern reader than like Poe is. So it's not difficult to get through. And it's short. It's not long at all. My version was 282 pages of the core of the story, and then you have the notes and stuff, which maybe it makes me a bad person, but I don't read those. I never do. But yeah, so definitely read this. Check it out. Go watch the movie. I'd like to see the 1960s version, because the only version I've seen is the 2004, but I love it. I love it dearly. Highly, highly recommend, and would love if you all have either read the book or seen the movie or seen the Broadway play even. Let me know what you all think. Absolutely obsessed, and 10 times more obsessed now that I have the original story in mind. So yeah, once again, sorry for the long, kind of disorganized video when I should have been doing other videos, but I'll get to that. And also, if y'all can see on the shelf, got some new books I'm planning on taking to college with me. So there will be an up and coming video. I'm planning it out because I can plan videos, I just don't. There'll be an up and coming video on what books I'm taking to college and why. Beyond like textbooks, beyond the required. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. You know, if you're new here and you don't know, I'm a Wattpad author. I'm Eliza Victoria 13 on Wattpad, and number 9 is wrapping up. Still working on the end of it. I'm finishing up my NaNoWriMo project. Today is actually July 30th, and so, you know, it's all due tomorrow. So I'm wrapping that up. You guys won't read that immediately. It'll probably be September, October, maybe even around Christmas. That might be a good idea to do for Christmas, because it ends up, it's a happy story. So, you know, that's finishing up, and you all will eventually read that, but it's also a present for somebody. So, you know, I want her to get the chance to read it and enjoy it before the whole world gets to see it. So yeah, and reading rush is over, and I'll be honest, I kind of failed, but we'll get it. You'll be getting a video on it, I promise. Because there's no shame in failing, and I'm not the only booktuber that failed. So I feel better. Thank you, Jessie. But yeah, and also there's a new chapter that I wrote on my co-writing project with Marissa Tomeo. Really like the chapter, and there will be a new chapter coming up very soon written by her from Lillian Barnes' perspective. I'm writing Evelyn Rogers' perspective. So definitely check that out if you get a chance. I'm really happy with the story. Yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week. Post every Wednesday.